Okay, so we are spiritual beings in a physical body. Our thought creates the reality around us, and we are all connected to other human beings. But we are now connected to the internet. So instead of me, if I am a human, transferring my thoughts to another human being, this will be intercepted by the internet instead, because that is the means now that we communicate. This is a different type of communication, I would think. A mechanical, inferior way, I would say, but it is the way humans operate now. And this is also because not all humans are the same now, because if you live in a technological world, the human being itself becomes more technological for different reasons. But assuming that it is just purely a kind of evolution, which I would, but assuming that, in other words, assuming because you use more technology, you become less human, just by the nature of using it, not because you are technological. You'd say, well, why would that be? But you become more, less personal, because the device is not always connecting. It's not the same as going out and sitting in a group of people. It's still communicating, but it's different. It's like me now. I'm not really I don't really know 100% who I'm communicating with. Of course, I do know, by that I mean most. I might know one or something, right, that I would say I know well, or two, whatever, maybe. But in general, even that is still not the same as directly face to face. It may or may not make a big difference in some circumstances, but most of the time, by and large, it separates human beings, and also it's just not the way that we were meant to communicate either. You see, that's my view anyway. But either way, as I say, it can make a human being more technical. And depending on whether you think this is good or bad, obviously I don't think that it's a benefit, because if you come from the viewpoint of mind that we're spiritual beings and that we communicate that way, and our thought creates reality, and our thinking combined with others, you can see that there's a very big difference between that and technology. There's a huge difference. In fact, the difference is beyond even my comprehension, very much so. And the point that I was going to get to, is that lost my train of thought there, but you see, that's the point, is that the matrix, which is the world around us, the earth that's around us, that is all technology. In fact, in many ways, it is nothing but technology. Of course, we are natural kind of beings, those that are the more less technological, the more natural, the more biological, whatever. I don't know the words you'd like to use, but there is differences between. Once you go, you can go and become, you can be mentally technological, but that's what it's all about, because we're spiritual beings, you see. And I'm not putting this as usual, I'm not putting it right. But because we are spiritual beings, that technology is totally the opposite to what we are. I'm losing my train of thought here again. I'm so sorry. It's I had it there for a second and it's gone. The thought was there where I had it concise and right, I think, but it's gone. But anyway, it's all technology around us, okay? You could even say this whole world, Earth, and however you want to think it is, because I've always assumed it was one way. But I would now probably say that because we do live in an illusionary world, and I live in make-believe anyway, as I've said before, I do believe in fairy tales, I do believe in the fantasy, I do believe we are Alice in Wonderland. And we don't know Wonderland, we don't understand it. We think what we see is everything as it is, whereas it's really Wonderland. We don't see it at all. And we don't see the technology either. We don't know that our world is just a technological mind game. It's a technological mind game. And if you really went completely out of this world, like I'm just going now, even low, I don't really totally believe it myself, but at the same time I think that it probably is so. But because I'm not advanced enough to really see it and to comprehend it, because we are at such a low frequency, because it's all frequency, vibration and energy, and that's all we are. That's all I am. I'm solid, but that's really all I am, because that's evidently the nature of how things work. I don't understand it, of course not, but I believe it to be true, and there is scientific merit coming to light now that this is definitely the case, and it has been the case all along, really. And that's why, because you see, human beings, real human beings, are spiritual, so they're kind of very delicate in a way. They're powerful, but they're also delicate. We're only delicate now because we're not powerful, because we're at low frequency. At high frequency, we would be delicate. In other words, by delicate, I mean that we feel and we're flexible almost. I can't use the right words, but we're like a mist almost. We can be blown any way that this technology or this world takes us. In the correct environment and at high frequency, we have control over this. And therefore, our delicacy, I'm not using the right word, or fragility, the innocence, the emotions, the feeling, which create the reality. So these are very important things. They are weaknesses. The Matrix sees these things as weaknesses and strengths. The Matrix exploits these. The Matrix is technological. It doesn't have these things. So it takes them from us to create the Matrix. But that we are still in the wrong environment, because that benefits the technological world, but we are not technological. Some of us have become technological, and therefore, if you become technological, you trade your spirituality for that. I don't think I put this very well, and maybe I'm not putting it clearly and not putting it succinctly, no. And I could be slightly off, but at a basic kind of level, this is what I think anyway. But I live in fairyland, so you don't have to believe everything I say or even agree with it. And, like, as I say, some apparent people, apparently, do not see these things as a benefit, because most people don't think that the emotions and the feelings are part of the creation of reality. They would see them as, just what they are, but not actually anything that creates or they don't see it that way, because it's not scientifically proven, and it's not something that we're born with it, but we're not told we're born with it. We don't develop it, we don't nurture it, as I've said before, so it stays at a very low level. But the matrix, it's like milk to a baby for the matrix, because the matrix is all knowing. It's technological, but it's still very knowing, because it takes all the knowledge and information from every source and every bit from every single human being that is and has probably ever been, etc., etc. I'm exaggerating here, but the point is that the internet does that now in its own way, because the internet is like everybody combining in this web. Well, they call it the World Wide Web, and it's a spider's web. I see it as a spider's web, a spider's web net. And who or what is the spider? Well, that is the source, that is the God entity that controls the whole thing. But and if you like that, if you like being part of that World Wide Web, if you like being part of that spider's web and serving the queen spider or the king spider or the main spider, the god spider, whatever, then you will be a bit like the beehive, where you have the queen bee and all the others are workers, and they have different names for them, but they essentially all are in the service of the queen bee, her survival, that queen bee's survival. Its survival is the main thing, and they're all quite willing to sacrifice quite a lot for that survival, because they have that mindset that that's what it is. It's like their universe almost. And that's like the internet is like that, because everyone is putting their little bit in, and individually it might not seem like much, but as an overall thing, it is like a master brain. And, but technology does not give. Technology takes. You give to the technology. It's a bit like a library. Each person has a book, and they put a book into that library. Each person has their thoughts and their ideas, and they put it onto the computer. And the computer then is the library. What used to be a library, but is now the computer. The computer now is the equivalent of the biggest library in the world, where all the so-called knowledge, etc., is kept and all in one place, and obviously I don't believe in most knowledge, as I've said before, because I don't think that is the real world for the spiritual person. I think it is the real world of the matrix, but the matrix is just as illusionary as the spiritual being, in my opinion. In fact, more so, because you don't experience it yourself. It's what is put into you. But it's what's already been put in by other human beings. And whether whether those human beings are correct or not is what you will take to be your reality, you see. But anyway, this is not what I was going to talk about today. I just start my usual little thing at the start, and then I go off onto complete tangents. But the computer is like what I'm doing here now with you. They will take the best of what people think and put there, and then put it into a master computer type of thing. A bit like building Frankenstein, where he picks all the different parts of the human and plonks them together to make one, and hopes that it is really good. My own personal view is that each individual spiritual human being is all there is and all there is needed, at high capacity, at its top level, which we have never went anywhere near that. There might be some that have, down through the many, many, many years. I've no doubt there has been maybe a few, maybe more that I know, but but also the matrix itself only operates at a low frequency, because the matrix is very physical, and the more very physical you are, that is the more you are of the matrix, and the less spiritual, and therefore the low frequency, low vibration, whatever, low emotion. Well, when I say low emotion, I mean like not happy emotion, because you can have emotion, you can be full of emotion, but if it's all negative and anger and aggressive, that sort of thing, that's a negative thing. So that's low vibration, I would think. Whereas high vibration is where you are the opposite to that, and balanced. And I was going to say that it's gone from me, but it's like, forget it. I'm going to go off onto something else, because my thoughts are not clear enough. I was going to go back, if you can bear with me, to the scorpion and the frog thing from the movie, but it's a famous parable anyway, the scorpion and the frog, where the scorpion asks the frog to take him to the other side of the river because he can't swim across, and the frog, of course, is reluctant because he knows it's a scorpion and scorpions sting, and there's no reason for the frog to really trust the scorpion, but the scorpion begs him and says, why would I sting you? You'll be doing me a good turn, and I need to get to the other side, etc. And of course the scorpion does sting the frog after he has reluctantly agreed to help him, because he's a good-natured little frog. And even though he's a bit suspicious, he still thinks there's no logical reason why he would do it, because it's not in his interest. But he does do it, and as the parable goes, when they're both drowning, the frog says to the scorpion, why did you do it? And of course his simple answer is, because I am a scorpion. In other words, he can't help it. because he's a Scorpion. It's in his nature. He has not risen above his nature and doesn't care to, probably, either. And the reason I mention this parable is because we now live in a world, in a matrix world, or at least in my fantasy, it's definitely a matrix. But either way, it's a matrix because it's very technological. To me, a matrix is something that is very controlled and very technological. And it is that, even if you don't, even if you don't want to take it to my fantasy to where it goes a bit further than that. But it's been technological for a long time, and it is always, it's not a free, just random place anyway. It is governed by rules and directions and society and systems and, groups of people that all agree on certain ways that it has to function. It's not like, someone like myself could just slop along and think, oh, I can just, just pretend that all the rules don't exist or that the other people and their ideas don't exist. It's almost agreed on. It's a bit like, and you put people in place to see that these things are carried out, and it's, what I mean. It's not like even in the wild, but even in the wild, there's still certain ways things are going off the track. Back to the Scorpion and the frog. The reason I mention that is because in today's Earth, we have different types of human beings. Now, when I say different types of human beings, I mean human beings, but they are different personality types. We have what they call a narcissistic personality type, a almost psychopathic type of personality type. Those two are very related, even though they're different. I've looked into it a little bit in very recent times because, as I've said before, most of the people I have known in my life have been of that personality type, almost without exception. Of course, I didn't realise that this was the tag you'd put on it, or the title, or the or what the name of it was. I just knew they were all similar, and I wondered for a lifetime almost why these people had so much in common and why they were drawn to me or I was drawn to them, and I suppose I thought they were still a very small minority, but I thought maybe I was just because my own family had been like that, maybe I just assumed that then naturally I would not notice this so much, and this is probably true too. But anyway, I've gone off, but the thing is that the Scorpion in the parable is very much what I would say now, very much like the narcissist or the psychopath. They can't help, in a way, what they actually do, because it's their whole being, just like the Scorpion. It ends up becoming their whole being as opposed to just a little personality trait. It becomes their whole way of feeling and thinking all the time. They do push themselves very much away from the spiritual human being in a way, but they are human beings. That must be stressed. They are our kind, but they appear to be very different to a very empathetic human being. a real softy, that gets upset and feels a lot of stuff. They do appear to be, I mean, they can mimic that feeling, but they have feeling, but it's very much only how they feel. It's not how someone else feels. Whereas a normal spiritual human being has strong feelings about themselves and strong feelings, but they also will, especially the more they are spiritual, they will probably, and because human beings are all connected, which is another thing that some people don't think is true, but because of that, and if they're at that, you see what I'm trying to say, is they will feel for the other person even more. They will, even if they don't want to, because actually, if someone is feeling, if someone else is feeling bad, it's not always pleasant to take that feeling on. But at the same time, this, that will also depend on how, how strong that person is that way. It's probably better to have a balance. As I've said before, a normal human being, even a spiritual human being, should be really fairly balanced, if possible, I would imagine. Because when you go, even though it's good, it's okay to feel a lot for someone else. But either way, some of us can't help that. But it's okay, and it would be okay if we were not living in a matrix, as I've said before, but we do live in a matrix. We do live in a world, in other words, that is not totally spiritual. It is not. It could be, but it has gone into the negative realm. So when it's in the negative realm, it's not high spirituality. It's not high vibration, it's low vibration. It's still spiritual because there are human beings still in it. I don't know myself, in my fantasy way of looking at it, even I am not sure if all human beings exited from the matrix. In other words, they all were dead or whatever. If that would mean that the matrix would be totally non-spiritual 100%. In other words, just be totally mechanical, technical, whatever. I mean, there again, I'm exaggerating because I don't fully understand what I'm saying. But, and I'm trying to keep it basic. One day I'll get it right, maybe, but, not so far. But you see what I'm saying? Because, but I'm saying that originally, or as I would say it is meant to be, it's meant to be all spiritual. It's not meant to be technical. But many people would differ on that. And even I, because of the way that I'm expressing all this and because of my own personal idea and even belief in a way that we have gone so far away from what we were meant to be and away from getting to our highest level, which to me is high in all ways. And that's where most people would probably diverge from everything, or at least some things that I say, because we worship intellect in this world and we worship the knowledge and all this stuff, and I don't think that is such a necessary thing. It would just come, I think, if you get to a high spiritual level, because then you would, as I've said before, you'd automatically then know so much more. And you would also realise that so much of what you do know is just not a benefit to you anyway. It may not be a benefit. You may not need it. But either way, I've diverged. The scorpion and the frog. The scorpion is the narcissistic, psychopathic person. Now, I know I shouldn't really lump those two in together in a way, because they are different. A psychopath always, to me, has always been like much more extreme than the narcissist. But the narcissist can be very destructive too. It can be very destructive. They're essentially not acknowledging their spiritual side much. Some of them have pushed it totally under the rug. And that's why we put this title on it, really, because that's the only thing that makes them different from what I would consider to be, what I thought used to be the average human being. This also is not the case now either, anyway, as I've said before. This whole world we live in now is not at all like I thought it was, ever. Now, the narcissistic personality type of being, I will say they're a type of being, just as when I say human being, I mean a spiritual being. Even though most people would say, well, that's what everyone is. And of course this is true at a kind of genetic level, because there again I'm making out as though I know more than what I do. I don't even know what I'm talking about when I say genetics, but I do mean, in my fantasy way of looking at it, a human being is a genetic being in a way also, in a way, okay? It's not all just like a ghost, no, of course not. It's a genetic thing. It's a physical thing, even though it's a spiritual being. But even in this physical body that we're in, which is now been brought to rack and ruin, and I'm not just talking about mine, I mean even younger people, because it's not at a high level. And this is why we think that the technology and the matrix will offer us ways of making our body better and preserving us. But that is because the human body at a genetic kind of level is also at the very lowest level. And this is because the spiritual level is at a low level, and also because the matrix is 100% technological, whereas the authentic spiritual human being is not 100% technological. I know that at some sort of scientific or more advanced intellectual level, science or something could just shoot down everything I'm saying in the blink of an eye. I have no doubt about that. And they would be correct, because I do not know those things. And I don't want to know them either, because I don't believe them. But there is still some merit to science with the body. But I would say that it matters not. But for most people, because you're dealing with this biological body that appears very physical, you just have to say that, hey, it's a bit like, like I've said before, you are what you eat, or what you breathe in, or what comes into your body will either make that body better, or it will make it worse. Now, if you're in a matrix, which is a very physical domain, and if that matrix is very technological, and if that matrix is very dirty, and the human body is meant to be clean, because it's meant to be not in a technological environment. Technology belongs with technology. If human beings were technological in their biology, shall we say, then they would be fine in the matrix, this world we live in now. But they are not, just as animals are not. And this is why many species have died out, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure about that, but, But as I've said before, like a fish out of water, I think I used that one, but we are out of water, but we're getting water splashed on us, so we're still alive. So the Matrix uses what it can out of the human being. And the human being is like the source of power that keeps the Matrix going for lots of reasons. For lots of reasons. We're the resource of the Matrix. Just as the food we eat is our resource, we are the resource of the Matrix. And the beings, and the technology, and the technological God, if you like, because there's always got to be a governing force behind something, even if it was a great big, like they have these, what do they call them, big artificial intelligent machines. In other words, the huge computers, massive computers, that maybe can hold so much. They could maybe store the brain power of every human being into one computer or something ridiculous like that. Ridiculous, but I think it's ridiculous. But if it's a reality, then it's not ridiculous. I just don't go along with it, but it's still a reality. And to those that do like it, they think it's something wonderful, something amazing. It is amazing. But that's only because each individual human being does not realize that just one single authentic spiritual human being, in my fantasy world, the opposite to what some other people might say, it's the other way around. That one human being, their one mind, their one whole whatever, with spirituality and at high frequency, you could have that computer with all the information of all the world and it would not compare. But we don't think that way, and most of us don't experience it. In fact, none of us probably do. Them, I don't know. They probably have been. So therefore, of course, that other being and that massive mastermind computer, artificial as it is, would appear to be much more advanced and much more of everything. But it's not, because it's just taking what is from each human being. And, like I say, it doesn't give to us. It takes from us. And then we bow down to it. A bit like, well, that's technology for you. And that is the Matrix. And that is the God entity, which is like I say, the controlling force of the whole Matrix. That is the means. That is the magic. That is the source of the God's power. That is the source of the Matrix power. I don't think I've explained it well. I'm sorry. Now, the scorpion and the frog, back to that, the narcissist, the psychopath. The scorpion was a narcissist or a psychopath, okay? So he couldn't help but kill the frog, even though the frog was a benefit to him and helped him, and could have perhaps helped him again had he not killed him, but he could not help it. Now, this is something that I think I might have brought up before, but I'm not sure if I have. I think I might have. But the thing is that in this world that we have now, in this matrix, we have different personality types of the human being only, okay? Of a real human being, okay? So I'm not talking about animals or other species or other kinds, etc. But amongst the real human beings, we have this discrepancy, you could say, because some people have actually said, I've heard them say, that maybe narcissists are not real human beings because they've removed themselves so far from the spiritual and from the feelings for others, etc., and the empathy and all that sort of stuff that we talk about. And, you know, and I think this is true, but at the same time, I think it's my own personal belief is that the narcissists and the psychopathic personalities, I don't know what the percentage of the narcissist to the psychopath is, okay? In other words, how many people? I would imagine there are a lot more narcissists than psychopaths. In fact, if you'd asked me a few years ago, I'd have said there's not very many psychopaths at all, even though I at that time didn't even know the title of the narcissist. But it doesn't really matter because they're all very, they tend to bring the vibration of other human beings down. They have that ability, and they are like the scorpion in the sense that they need to do this. And as I've said, everything is frequency vibration, and that's what we are, and that we're meant to raise the vibration. So as you can see, it's not just the matrix that keeps the vibration down. It's even other human beings. Now, my own personal view on this, and I have nothing to back it up at all, absolutely nothing, is that I was told a year or so ago that 2% of the population is narcissistic. 2%. Now, I do not think this is true at all. My own personal belief, and I have nothing to back it up, is that because, you see, remember this, and this is actually true, because I got this from so-called authorities, shall we say, you know, medical or whatever, so I'm not making this part up, but most of what I say is made up or fantasy, depending on if you care to think that it's a possibility or a reality. You know, as I've said, I believe in fairy tales. But the 2%, whereas my own personal opinion, just as time has went on, is that the narcissistic personality type makes up at least half of the population, half of the human population, okay? So that means, you know, I would even stretch it higher than that, perhaps. But either way, as you can see, there is a difference between 2% and half or more. And one day I'll probably be able to, maybe be able to get a closer statistic, an imaginary statistic closer for you or for myself, because I really, I think about it for myself, and then but I think it's important in the sense that, as I was saying before, I personally believe that the narcissist that personality, that human being that I think make up half of the population or more, could be even significantly more than that even. The narcissist and the psychopathic personality type, but the narcissist would probably be many more of those. And there again, narcissists vary in how negative they can be and how much power they have to inflict that negativity. In other words, how much power they have to keep the matrix at a low vibration is what I'm saying. So if you have half or more, and they I believe myself, I believe the narcissist, that personality type holds the key to the matrix. They have the power of the matrix in their hands, and most of them don't know it, because they are like the swinging voter. I don't vote, but they're like the swinging voter. They say the swinging voter decides the election. Well, in my view, the narcissist is like the swinging voter. They hold the key to the matrix. They will decide whether the matrix goes high or low vibration. And as you can imagine, because they are negative, I think that this, I think this is why the human being that is trying to raise the vibration of the matrix, and as I've said before, at this time I was informed a while back that this was the time when there was, you could almost say the moon and the stars were in alignment or something ridiculous like that. And this may or may not be ridiculous, but I'm assuming it is. But all I'm saying is that conditions that we don't understand were conducive for the vibration to rise, almost not naturally, but relatively effortlessly. If some could raise it, the lot would raise it. Whereas in the past, this was not always available. The matrix did not have to do very much to keep itself functioning and to keep the vibration low. Now, some of you might say to me, well, look, we want to keep the vibration low because we want to keep the matrix. We don't want to see it change, or we don't want to see it disintegrate. Well, it may or may not disintegrate. I wouldn't think that it would disintegrate. It could. But if it did, there would still have to be another reality to replace it, wouldn't it? So it would be, instead of being a dark reality, it would be a sunny reality. But if you live in the dark and you're a dark being and you are negative, then you want to keep the negative low vibration, you see. And this is what I'm saying. All human beings are not the same. But I will say, yes, the narcissist and the psychopath hold the key, in my opinion, at this present time, to they are the swinging voter. They will decide the election. They will decide which way the matrix goes. And the reason that they also will decide it is because if their numbers are much higher than what statistics say, because like I'm not being I don't think I'm being kind of know-it-all by saying that, because I do take it from just personal experience. So it's not like like I say, and don't forget that what I was told, even from the correct sources, the correct authorities that have the bit of information they do about these things, when they said 2% of the population, they openly would also acknowledge that that's only based on human beings that are pretty much diagnosed as being narcissistic or psychopathic. But they will also say that narcissistic people rarely get diagnosed because they don't see themselves as they don't see that as something to go to a doctor about. It's not a problem for them. To them, they are better. So they don't go to a doctor saying, I'm a narcissist, I think perhaps I need to talk about some problem or something. They're not like people where most of us that are more human, we know our faults. We tend to know negative things about us. But if you see something as negative as a positive, you're not going to see that as something that you should get help about. So what I'm saying is that those statistics of 2% are based on people who are diagnosed, and most narcissists are not diagnosed because they don't think that they've got a problem. They don't think it's a problem. We think it's a problem if you're not, because you will be your vibration will be pulled down by the narcissist because they have great power. But in massive numbers, if their numbers are much, much higher, they basically will stop the matrix from ever rising in its vibration. So the narcissist and the psychopath to me are very, very important. They're important in many ways. They themselves, even as individuals, they know they have the power over other individuals, but they don't realise that they also have the power to change their entire world, because most narcissists are only interested in a one-on-one half the time. But that one-on-one, if that one-on-one is one on a potential high frequency spiritual being, that is connected to other human beings. And provided the technology is not too powerful, provided there is still that little connection, it's meant to be like a domino effect where the vibration goes from one to another, and therefore the whole world changes. This will never happen, of course, and has never happened, I don't think, much in the Matrix. I wouldn't think that it has ever been, because it is a system, it's a matrix, and it is. But it is still, that's the nature of things, is that that's the it should have been a potential, I would think. Good feeling spreads, bad feeling spreads too. Everything spreads, but you see, that's not spreading by the internet. That's a different means. That is, a one-on-one, person-to-person contact based on vibration. All I'm saying is that all these things are contributing factors, and they keep the matrix at a very low frequency. And those numbers, make a big difference. I don't think I put this very well. But I will try to get back to what I'm saying. Is that, well, I'm sure most of you probably get what I'm saying, even though I'm not putting it. You probably might even know it yourselves anyway. I'm probably, floundering here completely. But it is like even the narcissist. I've gone off way off my stuff here, but it's all about personal stuff. This is about spiritual beings. A narcissist is a spiritual being. It's just that they have gone much more the way of the Matrix. They don't know they've gone the way of the Matrix. They don't know that they have the power to push the Matrix into negative or bring it more to a balance or to more positive. And this is just my view that this is how it works. But either way, the narcissist is the key to the Matrix, I think. In the sense of the numbers, because the key to the Matrix really should be up to the human beings that are raising their frequency, their vibration, etc. a little bit, or a lot if possible, but if you are surrounded by a technological world and you are then surrounded also by other human beings that are at low frequency, because narcissists are at low frequency. They're at low frequency, but they have the power to push that frequency onto human beings that might not want to be at low frequency, who are trying to perhaps go to a higher frequency. So it does work that way, because the old saying, you're only as good as the company you keep and what's around you. Now you might say, well then, if that's the case, you need to find other slightly higher frequency. But, that is the case. But as I've said before, if more people go into low frequency and more people are much more narcissistic, the actual human being that is not like that and that wants to raise the frequency, there are going to be a lot more limited numbers for that human being to find other human beings that are not at that low frequency and not going to send that frequency to them. So then everyone becomes low frequency, as you can imagine. So then the Matrix gets darker and darker, and it's already very dark, very dark. And what I'm trying to say is that even the narcissist doesn't know this, because, or at least some of them might, and some might be of that and might like the dark and might not care if the Matrix is very, very dark. They may even like it. See, I am speaking from my own perspective, and I keep forgetting and must always remind myself that all human beings are different in their frequency and in their view of what they think is acceptable for the Matrix, of what they think is desirable for the Matrix. One person might see something as violent, another person might see that same violence as not particularly violent at all, as quite acceptable, even necessary, some even desirable, which, this might boggle some of us. But it is still a reality. I don't think that it is how things were originally meant to be, as I've said before with my little fairy tales, but it is very much how things have gone and become for different reasons. But like I say, the narcissist, in larger numbers than what we think, or at least what I would have thought anyway, and I didn't even know their existence even for that matter. I thought I had just been born into a family that way, and that, in general, most people were balanced, normal people. This is not the case, I don't think. Now I think there is very few people that are balanced, that are in the centre. Most seem to be one extreme to the other. I don't know why this has happened. It's probably happened over a long period of time. But either way, like I say, the narcissist is in vast numbers now, at least 50%. So that means for every human being, there is a negative force working against them. In a way, if you look at it that way, because that's assuming, of course, that the other 50% that are not narcissistic are human beings and are endeavouring to be at a slightly higher frequency or a more positive, or are not as negative. Not as negative can be destructive, so not as destructive, not needing. See, a narcissist is like a scorpion, like the scorpion in The Frog and the Scorpion. It needs to do its negativity. It needs to be negative. It needs to sap the positive from the life force, from the positive human being. It needs it, and it can't help it, because that's how the nature, this is part of the condition of the personality type. Just as the more positive, just as a really empathetic human being cannot help but be empathetic. You know, you could say that's a weakness, but they can't help but, want to create. I was about to say create rather than destroy, but it is kind of like that. But they may not be create, but they just don't destroy. They don't need to destroy. They don't take any pleasure in destroying, and they don't need that life force, because the spiritual human being at a normal level already has life force inside of them. Technology has no life force inside of us, and human beings that become too psychopathic lose that life force, or it becomes so very negative anyway, a negative kind of life force. You know, I'm not explaining this very well. I comprehend it myself, but I'm just not very good at putting the ideas across, because this is not my expertise either, by the way. In fact, none of this is my expertise. I don't have expertise, but I do understand this actual thing quite well, because it's been my life experience. So I'm not totally talking through my hat when I speak of it, but certainly when I talk about the numbers and the infiltration and the expansion of that. There are some people that do agree with this, but in general, unless you can prove statistics. But it's important because, like I say, if you've got a very minority in a population that's negative, it isn't going to change things. If you meet one, it will change you, and that can, if you were a powerful spiritual being and you were brought down by the frequency, yes, then it could have some effect, because that could affect others perhaps. This will depend on how this matrix is really working now, and how connected spiritual human beings are still connected to one another. Because my own personal belief, even though I don't think that it should be true, and I don't think it's desirable, but the real reality in even my own observation is that this world now is a technological world, and it is a technological matrix, as I've said, but it has that technology, would be making the human connection, the spiritual human connection, very weak, probably. That technology can literally, at a physical level and a mental and even a spiritual level, if you look at it that way, because if something takes over your mind, it's, you're not going to, I don't know how to explain this, because see, when you're talking about the mind and the spirit, it sounds as though they're the same or they're different, but and I'm not thinking very clear today anyway, but look, if something completely takes over your mind, it will probably take your spirit too, okay? So then you will become null and void. You become a technical being for all practical purposes, even though you're still a human being. And maybe if you use less of the technology, you could get it back. I don't know. But I'm saying that it whatever takes over your mind will take over your spirit as well. You know, a lot of people don't think that. They think that if they're using a technological a device, that they're still a real human being. You know, they are, but they really aren't in a way as well, because they're not connected to one another in the way they're meant to. They're connected to the technology. Sure, they're connected to other human beings as well. Yes, I'm talking to some human beings maybe now. But the technology is taking more than what I am giving to the few real human beings that might be somewhere through this screen, if you follow me. I'm feeding the technology much more than I'm feeding the human being, which is the sole purpose of making the video. And, you know, some might say, well, that's only because you don't have many viewers. If you had millions of viewers, it would be serving the purpose. Well, it would be countering it, I would say. It's a bit like the narcissist and the humans. It's a question of numbers, so it's a question of probably input. And I'm trying to sound intelligent here, even though I really don't fully know what I'm saying. But you would need to have vast numbers to counter. But you're still giving to the technology. It would just depend on, well, the technology is about you know, the technology is here to influence and to become part of the mind of the human being. So, you know, it's not separate. It appears to be separate, but you know, what you take into your mind, whether it's at a library or a computer, but that computer takes as much from as what it gives, because you have to give to the computer first before it even can give back. But to my way of looking at it, it only gives back what you've already put in. And you might say, yeah, well, 1,000,000 minds is better than my one stupid mind. Well, of course, that makes sense to most people. But I don't agree with that. I do agree that, yes, my mind is stupid, but that's only because I'm at low frequency. If I was at high frequency, it wouldn't matter if there was, a 1,000,000 minds put into the computer, which it is. It wouldn't matter, because I would know enough for myself to where that computer with its 1,000,000, 2,000,000, 3,000,000, 10,000,000, 1,000,000,000, billions, it wouldn't matter if it was everyone on this so-called earth, whatever. It wouldn't matter, because I would still know more. Oh, I wouldn't have all this information. I wouldn't need it. It would not be of any use to me. You know, because if you understand, if you were able to understand what the cosmos or whatever is, that I'm trying to be fancy here because I don't know what the cosmos is, but in other words, everything, or understand even just this realm we're in. this matrix, this what it is. I mean, people are trying to fathom out what it actually is even anyway, although we've been told it is a certain thing for a long, long time, and most people would go along with that, but others might dispute that. But you would just know. You would know, I think. This is what I think. You wouldn't have to all this painstaking looking in and still not finding, what things really are. Even just, the fact that that some people, and these are definitely in, I would say in my humble opinion, the more brilliant minds, if you'd like to look at it that way, even though I'm not big on the mind, as you know, I talk about the spirit, because the spirit is all. The spirit will automatically give you everything that the mind could possibly know and imagine automatically. It's beyond that. It's just knowing everything you should know. That we should even, some things obviously we probably should even be taught, but if you don't have the right information, you'll get, we change even history changes all the time. We change our opinions on different things. We change we even change our history because we might discover something that we were wrong about. That happens all the time, but what I can see, even though I don't delve into all that, I'm not an academic type, and at the present time I'm really stretching it. I'm trying to actually be something that I'm not. I don't enjoy it, and I don't think that that's what, I don't care if someone says I'm a dodo. I think you are meant to just be raising that frequency, and whatever this place is, we're supposed to enjoy it. I think I've said this before, and I pass it on, but the thing is that it is hard to even enjoy the matrix if you are if it is a matrix and you are a natural being. That is assuming you are. If you are happy with the technology, if you are happy with going away from nature, etc., all that sort of stuff, if you are, then it's not a problem. So I'm not here to tell people that they should be one way or the other. I'm just saying what I think is what you're meant to be and what would be the best. This is just my fantasy way of looking at it. And, I personally believe it, but, you don't have to, and that's okay. And really, there's no reason that in even a different matrix that you couldn't have things coexisting even, not merging. Coexisting. There's a difference between coexisting and something infiltrating. See, the technology now is everywhere, so it's infiltrated, it's merged. I don't agree with that. I think that you should be able to take a break from technology. You should be able to move away from it if you choose to. But we don't really, that's the problem, is because it is everywhere. That those that particularly if you tend to believe in total spirit, because I think most people probably, I could be wrong, but probably most people wouldn't disagree with the idea of spirituality or spirit so much, but they also do think that it's not all that there's the physical and there's technology, and they think these things are of great benefit, and that there's no reason that you can't use one and that it should have a detrimental effect on the other. That's probably the main difference in where I would come from. And this is only looking at it from what I really do think is correct in a way. It's not because I've experienced it myself. It's not because I particularly have been spiritual, or that I do base my actual idea on this. on what I would say are facts in a funny kind of way, which is strange. It's almost as though I've looked at things and come to that kind of conclusion almost, as opposed to actually experiencing, because it should just be experienced. But I have experienced, it's a bit like saying haven't experienced the positive, but I've experienced the negative. So I know that the negative is no good, and therefore there must be a positive that is much better. It's kind of like that, but that's not putting it very well. And I could have put that a lot better, and I could have put it more directly, but for some reason I don't seem to do that very well. Maybe one day I will. In a different matrix I probably would. But I find this matrix is a negative realm. It's a low frequency earth, shall we say. And, so I don't want to go too much in the other direction because it's not practical. And I don't believe in being practical. But in a matrix you have to be practical. But at any rate, yeah, like I said, the narcissist holds the key to the balance of the matrix at the present time, I would say, and it could all rest upon this because, if the frequency of the earth is largely controlled by the human being, even though the matrix, of course, controls the human being, like I say, and particularly the technology, because if you turn your TV on right, as I do, and you watch something negative or something that makes you feel sad or something depressing, your frequency goes down. See how the technology has brought the frequency down. But then if you go and bump into someone and have a conversation with someone and that person is a negative frequency and is a Scorpion or is a narcissist who needs to feed off the negative energy. The matrix feeds off human negative energy because the matrix is all spiritual negativity. Put bluntly, put at a basic level, and it doesn't sound real good to some people, but that is just the truth of the matrix, because it's a bit like saying we are in this dimension, you could say. We are in a negative dimension. Yeah, I know I don't know what I'm talking about when I say dimensions and all this stuff, and I admit I don't. But that's just trying to put it at some comprehensible level for myself or for you. But yes, I don't understand dimensions. I wouldn't even know if they exist. But they probably do. But either way, it doesn't matter, because this dimension, this reality we are in, this earth, this matrix is low frequency. The human being controls the frequency of it because the human being is the creator. Because the human being's thought, with the emotions and the frequency and vibration, combined with massive numbers, even though individually that thought and that feeling is important. And don't forget, some human beings may be possibly more capable of sending the vibration. The lines might be clearer, shall we say. There might be less interference, or that person might be more of a sender. Maybe some people are more receivers and some are more senders. But it's meant to be sending to other human beings. But we now send to technology as well. So it's a complicated matrix world. And we seem very small in it. But that's a mistake too, I think. A mistake that I've made all my life. and one that most of us make, and that it's unavoidable because the matrix is all powerful and the matrix is all around, and the matrix is a certain frequency, and it has and we live in it. So as I said, it's all around us, and a bit like the movie where it says the matrix is all around you, and this is it. And if all around you is negative, then you will be negative. So if the matrix is, so therefore you're low frequency, as I've said before. I'm repeating myself. I'm so sorry. But those numbers that I mentioned with the narcissist, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that the matrix could get lower and lower in frequency. That's if it's possible for it to get any lower. I would say that it's in its correct dimension and it is pretty low. But it's possible to get lower, I suppose. And what I'm trying to say is that if even the narcissist, which needs to get the negative energy off the positive, see, the matrix is, and its followers, the matrix God and the followers that control the matrix, the technology, whatever, they tend to be like vampires in a way. But then you also have, we live in a vampire thing. I like horror movies, but I didn't realise I was actually living in a real life one. I used to enjoy watching them on the TV and still do. But in reality, that is the reality. I believe in the movies and the fairy tales and things, but I think that, like if you're talking about narcissists, they are actually real people, and that is a real condition. So, if I want to say they're vampires, well, they're like vampires in the sense that they take positive energy from positive people. And they need that. It is like blood. The same way a vampire needs blood, they need that negative energy off a positive human being. But if they do that, then that makes the matrix lower. But what they don't realise is that they do that actually at an individual level most of the time. And so most of them don't actually think that they are changing and they have the power, that the narcissist individually and collectively have the power to change the whole world. In other words, they can make it lower still. They can make the vibration lower so that we're living in a lower frequency vibrational earth, shall we say. It's amazing that I'm saying this and I don't know what I'm talking about, because I'm actually thinking in my head, like, what does this earth look like, really? That's never occurred to me before. I could thank some other ones for that, for saying, like, is the earth what we think? What does it really look like? How does it really function? See, I'm talking about frequency and vibration. So whatever it is, it's changing. But, could it change its shape? This is ridiculous, I know. But, I don't know. But it's certainly, but the actual reality, the physical actual reality can be changed by the thought and by the vibration. But, so it does, I have to admit that it gets beyond me, and that it kind of, it would be nice to, I'm sure that if we were more aware and we were not so limited, all these things that seem so very complicated, that go beyond your mind and you think, I could never figure this out. And some actually do figure it out and actually look and certainly do a lot better than me that way. But it probably would still be simple once you know something and once you comprehend it. But if you've been told certain things and you get used to it, and it's kind of, because anything that is not correct is going to be limiting, and that's what I say. But and also if you're not used to it, if you're used to dealing with concrete reality only with the energy, and not thinking in terms of that it could change, and that you can't see that your thought actually changes it before your eyes, because it doesn't happen like that now, because we're not functioning fully, and we've never seen it happen. I believe it's the way it is, and that it should be that way. It's not functioning that way now, no. And that's why it doesn't seem plausible, because if I say something and say, yeah, but you can't do it before your eyes, we say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. You say you're in fantasy land. Well, it's not just fantasy land, it's total imaginitis completely. But anyway, like I say, that idea, that thing that, narcissists do definitely take negative energy off people. Whichever way you look at it. And if their numbers are much vaster than what we believe, and most people probably don't think that many of them are there anyway, I'm sure that they must know. But, even narcissists would not know that, they think it's just a personal thing. They think they're just like a vampire that sucks the blood of someone else, and that gives them energy. But they get the negative energy, they create negative energy in other human beings, and that fills them with life, makes them feel good. Very similar there, those two things. They need it to feel alive almost, just as the vampire needs blood to be alive. And they get that off real human beings only. But they don't know that the real human beings are in smaller number than what even they realise. So their source of supply is more limited than what they realise. So while they randomly drain and exhaust their supply, they're depleting their nutrients, because it would be much wiser, probably in my view, for them to try to come back to being more normal for this reason alone, for their own survival, because the numbers are fewer, they drain what is there, and also then they change their whole environment, because even they probably think they're like a vampire, but they don't want to change their vampire land. They may not want to change the environment, for instance. They may not want to necessarily live in a totally closed system world. They may not want to live in a world where there are restrictions even on them. In other words, their vibration will change the whole world if there's enough numbers of them. And even they only really want the direct supply of a human. But the consequences of that is that because everything is frequency and vibration, and the real human beings have the potential to change the reality and the vibration, their input is vital. And they will not only suck the life out of human beings, real ones, that is, but they will change the very whole reality. Not just because they change a little bit what's around them, and they change the human beings that's around them, because they make positive into negative, because they need that for their food supply, shall we say. But, you end up then with a total vampire land, shall we say. In other words, like the vampire getting the blood, you end up with total vampire land. You don't end up with any other land. You end up with a dark, negative vampire land, which is okay if you want to live in a horror movie 24/7. Like I say, even those like myself that enjoy the odd horror movie probably don't really want to have it around me 24/7 in every corner of the world, in every corner of the matrix, because it will spread, because of the numbers and because of the vibration and because of the power that these individuals have. And I don't mean like necessarily, they may have power even in the real world, they may have positions, but they may also just, by their very numbers, even at individual levels, they have the power to change the matrix. Because, in my fantasy world, the matrix was supposed to be, the vibration is supposed to rise. That is not just my fantasy, this is the view of some people anyway, that the matrix was supposed to rise. Of course, that is extremely difficult in light of the reality of the numbers. And you see, the numbers are the key. That's why I mentioned the narcissist. The numbers are the key. The numbers are the key to what some people talked about, the awakening. It's never been possible. Not now. Although if you're an optimist, and we all should be, and we try to be, I am not, but I want to be. And there again, that raises the vibration if you are an optimist. So it is imperative to be one, really. But so this is the complication. But the awakening was possible, probably, for a period of time, maybe, when the numbers were different. The numbers in this world now, I think, in my fantasy world, and it is a horror movie, yes, it is a negative thing, so I am taking it to the extreme. This could just be my reality. It could be my delusion, my illusion. But, and I'm just saying it even though I don't think it's good to even say it, but maybe it's important in one way. But it doesn't mean all's lost. No, I'm not saying that. The earth could be lost, maybe. That doesn't mean that you're lost, because the individual is still more important than the matrix, in my opinion. That's what I would say now. Whereas the people of the matrix, the beings of the matrix, humans even that like the technology, they think the earth is more important than the human being. I would have thought that way too, up until not very long ago. Now I say the individual human being is more important than the matrix, because the matrix is gone. It may not have had to have been, and it may not, and there could still be perhaps a glimmer of hope that it need not be gone. Some say it is best that it is gone. Some say it had to be gone. Some say it's a negative vibrational realm. It has to be that way. And it can't exist any other way. I don't think that myself, but it has gone that way now because of the numbers. Because, and I could be wrong about this, and I actually rather hope that I am, and I don't think that you should listen to it and believe it totally. But at the same time, it might, I'm not one to, I'll just say what I think at a given time. And as everything is frequency and vibration, I would imagine that it's forever changing. But it can get stuck. And all I'm saying is that it's a bit like, okay, it's a bit like that movie, and I have to fold up here soon because it's getting late. It's a bit like that movie, the one that I mentioned in a previous video, where the 12 boats had to go into battle against 120 or 130. Now, the odds of that victory, which it was a victory in the movie, and that was largely due to high spiritual level, in my view, of the movie. You'd have to see the movie yourself and take it as you said. But, it did seem like an impossibility. This is why I say the numbers, because we think the numbers are a certain way. But like I mentioned with the narcissist, the numbers are not. In my experience and my view of it, that's all. Not officially, shall we say, or on any survey, but there again, as I've gave the reasons why that wouldn't be correct anyway, because you can't get numbers if people don't come and say, put their hand up and say, I'm one of the number. So you'll then be speculating, and I'm speculating that the numbers are hugely high in favour of narcissists almost outnumbering non-narcissistic people, shall we say. Okay? But yeah, in this matrix, it's still about numbers. So yes, the 12 could theoretically take on the 130 and win, if those 12 were at high spiritual level and were able to get others. Because that's what happened in the movie too. The whole idea was that was, yes, like where because we're connected, it passed on, and therefore others that were neutral, shall we say. And those that sit on the fence, like I've done all my life. I've always been a fence sitter. I've always never wanted to jump one side to the other, and always tend to see both sides of things to a fault too. Sometimes even if you can see both sides, you still have to jump down off the fence and take a side, because you're going to fall off the fence eventually anyway. Just because you see two sides and you can be empathetic to two sides doesn't mean that there isn't a right or a wrong side. No. And of course, if you don't like to take a side and you don't like to play a game and you don't like to, if you're not a game player, but you're forced into a game, that's how I've always seen myself. I've always said, well, I don't care to play games. I don't like games. I don't like sports, so I don't care to do that. But on the other hand, if someone picks you up and throws you, onto a field and says you've got to play, if you don't play, we'll whatever, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, the numbers is the key. And if you look at this earth and you sort of say, well, yeah, look, the numbers, there's a certain number of people, and so we only have to swing it this way for a vibration for things to change. Just like if you've got an opinion on something, you only have to then change someone else's mind to get them online with your opinion. Look, there's truth to that, but it's really not as simple as that if you don't really understand how that all human beings are not all of the same vibration and are not all of the same type, and that the numbers are not what we think they are in any shape or form. I've only used one example of the numbers. I should stress that. In my fantasy way of looking at things, this narcissistic personality type, as opposed to the so-called normal human being, which I don't know that there's any normal human beings left anyway. I really don't. Because I don't think that I think that most human beings are not as normal as what they used to be. Some of them might be more intelligent, more academic, might know more. They've got their computers and all the rest of it. But they're not normal, in my opinion. They don't see what's in front of them anymore. They analyse things beyond belief, which is exactly what I'm doing. And I think it's ridiculous, but I'm doing it now more out of necessity. And it's a bit interesting, I will say that. But it shouldn't really be necessary. I've said this before, but it is now necessary. And because if you are told and if you start to say, oh, look, I don't believe now the reality quite so much. I'm thinking that what I thought was black might now be white, and you'd prefer it to be white. You like white. So you're going to investigate that. You're going to want to make that a reality. And that's good, because if you thought something was black and it really is white, it probably might change your way of looking at things and open your eyes quite a bit. Maybe for the best, if you then can prove to yourself that it's really white. But you'll have to do it the hard way, because you won't get a lot of help from the Matrix, and you won't get a lot of help from yourself even, because you'll probably be at low frequency. So you'll be really, and then you'll get frustrated, and then maybe it won't be so enjoyable. I know that's how it is for me. Whereas if you can enjoy it, then, I've gone off the track, but you know what I was saying. If you're looking for, if you're looking to prove certain things, if you're interested in certain things, if you see something isn't quite what you always thought, like we do that with lots of things, and even I could use examples. I don't tend to use examples. I'd be better if I did use examples, because then you'd probably know what I'm talking about more. But they might, some of the things that we've held beliefs for a long time, sometimes all of a sudden even scientists might say, oh, I think we didn't get that wrong, but we were a bit out, and maybe this is not right, or maybe, so it's like that in this world. And but at any rate, I talked about the narcissist and the vibration, and I've talked about movies, and I had a whole list of movies, which, so many movies that I can use, because movies are good for me to use examples to make some points, and because I believe that most movies represent reality, much more than what most people think. I think that they are, for me, they're not fantasy. To me, they're like, you could give me a fiction book and it might have fiction on it, and I might say, well, I don't think it's fiction. I'm going to enter into this fantasy and believe it. And there was another, talking about the frequency just before I go, and the scorpion and the narcissist and all that sort of stuff. There was a movie which I found a very negative movie, and even a disturbing movie, which I saw many years ago. It was an Academy Award-winning movie, very famous. It was called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, about this fella that gets wrongly diagnosed, really, because he's actually a normal fella, really, what I'd call normal, speaking of normal, and he ends up getting put in the asylum, or the mental facility, for the insane, or mentally whatever, like we all are. He was put in there with these other people that were supposedly mentally, certainly more mentally unstable and had problems more than what he really did. But he went in there, and in a way, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but I'm just going to use it as an example. So if I get some of it wrong, it doesn't matter. I'm just trying to make an idea, In that movie, he went in there with people that were very probably low frequency, because they were depressed, because they were in a mental place. and they probably were not treated that well. They were just stuffed with tablets, and that probably kept them at a lower frequency too, because you can be calm and you can be sedated, shall we say. You're probably almost non-feeling, but non-feeling is non-feeling is technology. Okay, I've gone off the track again, haven't I had to do that. But essentially this is it, like you're either low or you're high frequency. Of course there's a million things in between. It's not just low or high, but you know what I'm saying. But if you're at, if you take too many pills and stuff, sometimes you don't feel like low frequency, you almost don't feel at all, which can actually be a comfort. And this is the problem, is that sometimes we do seek that, the idea of not feeling at all, because if you're at low frequency, it's so unpleasant. You just like just a buffer, and you don't think it's possible to raise the frequency. So to feel nothing at all even seems desirable for some people. And this seems to be this is how this movie, how they treated the people in the movie in the mental place, just to keep them sedated and controllable. And he come in there, this normal person that really didn't have any mental illness, and he come in there and he basically was raising the vibration in there. But actually the movie shows that, like the Matrix in a way, in a funny kind of way, the actual medical institution, the asylum or whatever it was, the madhouse, the medical thing, didn't want the patients to be happy and running around and kicking up a fuss. They just wanted them to be calm and sedated, and not. But by that same thing, they were not raising their frequencies. They were not happy, and he come in there and he was actually raising their frequency because he was happy. He thought that they were not negative. He thought that they just needed to be shown that they could raise their vibration, that they could be happy, And as the memory serves me with the movie, he just made them happier and made them feel good about themselves a bit. And so their frequency was raising, and that's why, he eventually was, of course, made into nothing, or into a vegetable, you could say, because they didn't want that. They didn't want that. They couldn't deal with that. That was a low frequency institution, you could say, too, if you want to look at it that way. And he was doing that, but that's just another example anyway. But that was, I don't know why I mentioned that movie, but the movie was kind of showing that, and this is very much like the world, and it does show that that's what happens with human beings. See, he went into a negative institution where most of them were almost like zombies, because they were very sedated and in their normal and they were depressed and low vibration, and rightfully so. And he was changing it because he had a high vibration. He didn't think that you had to not have a good time even if you were in that institution. He was like, you don't have to think that you are just this vegetable that should sit there and become, a non-feeling human being, because essentially they were non-feeling, because, you take, they were being pumped with the pills by the thing so that they wouldn't get too excited, because then they might get upset. Anyway, that's the movie. Have a look at it if you like. It's not a very pleasant movie, but of course in the end there is the of course the end. Some people might well have seen as uplifting, even though the main character that was helping the others to raise their vibration, unfortunately he lost his life for that. But also it's interesting that his friend, I think it was a friend, who he had inspired to raise his vibration to where he had the power to escape the mental institution and be free and perhaps be happy. I'm exaggerating, of course, because I don't know this, but this is how the story kind of went. He killed the person that he liked and that had inspired him to raise his vibration. He killed him. He put the pillar over his head and killed him because, the same as my view on this reality or this idea of, if you cease to be a spiritual human being completely, if you become completely of the matrix, if that's putting it the right way, in other words, if you become too not spiritual to where you cease to be human almost at all, then, like that fella did to the main character, because the operation that they performed on him had turned him into a vegetable to where he no longer was a spiritual human being capable of being happy and raising the vibration or whatever. He killed him, and he thought it was a good thing to do because it was distressing, and he no longer was that person. He was dead. He was still breathing. See, this is what happens in this reality, is that you can become to where you focus. If you focus solely on the body, at the expense of everything, solely to where you only want to keep breathing and want to keep living. Yeah, I used to be like that. But I still think that I wasn't totally negative. But I still thought, hey, I just want to keep going. I used to say, it doesn't matter how bad reality gets, but I did always have, there's still something good in it. There's always something that might be good. That's why I kept going for most of my life. But if it got to the point to where, yes, you're a vegetable and you can no longer enjoy anything at all, then yes, it is a mercy almost for someone to extinguish that body, because the spirit has been extinguished in the body while you're in the body. May as well extinguish the body and let the spirit go. Because if you follow me, even though I don't fully know what I'm talking about, but that's the whole idea of that movie, I think, is that the person was no longer that person, because the thing that made that person special was their spirit, because he was raising the vibration of the fella and the others, and he had made him free and given him a high vibration, given him back life. Spirit is life. Real life. Evil spelt backwards is live. Evil is anti-live, anti-life. That's what I always say when I say evil. It's not like necessarily even bad, it's just anti-life. But that, for a normal person, would probably mean, yes, I suppose it is kind of bad, but it's essentially just not going with the life, with the spirit. That's how I always sort of see that word, and when I was told that it's backwards live type of thing, then it kind of makes sense. I don't invent these things myself, but if someone says something to me that makes sense, I'll certainly take it on board very quick and incorporate and say, hey, that fits everything else, and that's, it's correct as far as I know. And it's not such a bad way if we were living, if you can live in make the matrix a bit more positive, then I don't see any harm in it. I do not, personally see much positive in having a totally artificial world. I don't think this world was ever meant to be like that. But it is a matrix now, and how artificial it really is, even I could not fully say. I could stretch my imagination and say it's totally artificial. I could say, hey, even the idea of it being remotely natural is not really valid. I could say that, but I have no reason to actually see that or believe it totally, although sometimes I do see it that way. But that just depends on, where you are too, I think. So, but something could look natural and our eyes could be deceiving us, like my eyes could deceive me. In other words, because I've been told that everything is natural, and I think that because something looks like a living thing, that it is natural. Now, it could well be too, because the matrix is artificial, but at the same time, not all human beings are artificial, so therefore they are, more spiritual or more natural. Even at a physical level, I said this before, I don't fully understand this myself, I really don't, but at a physical level, even there is a spiritual, genetic kind of physical level even that is natural, that is different to something that is artificial, but can you tell the difference? That depends on how far technology is, and like I said this before, like you couldn't tell the difference between Dolly the sheep as a cloned sheep, because a clone is made different to a normal sheep. It's produced differently, it's manufactured differently, it's created differently. It's created by a human being in a lab, I suppose. It's not two natural things coming together and producing another sheep. It's different. I don't understand it, but it's different, and it did happen. But you couldn't tell the difference between Dolly, the sheep, and a regular sheep at all. So all I'm saying is that even our eyes can deceive, even with what we think is natural, or what we think is technical, or what we think is artificial, or what we think is a real world, a matrix. The matrix, to me, I've always said, like I say, the matrix, even just at a technical term, means that it's a system, and we live in a system. We live in a society, as I said before. That's a system. Society is a system because it's governed by rules. Everyone agrees on certain rules of how that society or that city or that town or whatever it is works, or country or whatever, I don't know, all those sorts of things. Anyway, I have just about, exhausted myself here, and even though I've made no input, and I may not even put this video out, the only reason I put it out is so that maybe one or two think that I'm still here, and that might be some benefit, because I don't think that my input is very great. And yet I had so many movies and a few ideas, but the matrix is complicated, and living is complicated, so it's not always, and I'm not very good at this anyway, so it's, and even though you want to, like the old saying, the mind is willing, but the body is weak, but also the spirit can be willing, but the body can be weak, because we are still in the body. So even though I might want to, I would probably like to talk into this device every day to some people, but it's just not possible. So the intention is there, but that's the reality, and that's the problem. And this is where we have to get it together, but we don't. Some might, maybe if you're younger and you've got more enthusiasm, and you should have enthusiasm. Don't take any notice of all my negativity, because even if you believe in something and you think, and either way, you've got to survive. So, it's important to, to keep positive. And like I said before, and I'll just end on this, and I think this is what I really think now, which is different to what I thought. The individual, this one individual, especially some, more important than the whole matrix. You can talk about saving the earth, and you can talk about this and that. There's nothing to save. The matrix does what it wants. The matrix does what it wants regardless, and the matrix will survive or it won't, depending on its own steam. It will decide its own destiny. Human beings now will have very little input into that, because our vibration is low and we're not united, we're not connected, and the internet will not be enough to save the matrix if it was going down or getting lower frequency. Of course, you can exist on low frequency for a long time anyway. There's no reason to think that the world won't be here because it's low frequency. But it's more a matter of whether some people might say, is it like the fella in That One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Is it time to put the pillow over the head if the spirit becomes so low? It depends on how low is acceptable, and it depends on what people or what beings are inhabiting that domain. I suppose what I would say is that if you want to be, figure it out yourself. A fish is suitable in water, but he's not suitable on dry land. It's a different frequency, it's a different world, it's a different environment, and that's the same. Like if you are a technological being, you like technology, you don't care for the spirit, you don't believe in it, or it isn't part of you, then a low frequency technological environment is not going to be alien for you. But there's more complications to that too, because even though that is the case, you may still need, as the narcissist himself or herself or itself needs a higher frequency individual to get the supply off, to get the negative off. It needs to bring down the frequency and get it off a feeling real human being. A narcissist cannot get that off other things. I don't think. Might be able to get some of it off other life forms, I'm not sure about that, but definitely not off any. But mostly the ideal thing is another human being, and this is the case with the matrix too, because the matrix does still even though the matrix is very technical and low frequency, it still needs and likes to have humans in it. It doesn't. It probably couldn't exist without human life, I wouldn't think. But it could perhaps still exist with animal life. if there was only animals. But that is life, that is still life, and there is spirit there, and maybe not at the same level. I don't understand these things. But then again, that would depend on, you know, the matrix God, the entity, and those that control the matrix, operate the matrix, you know, how they saw fit that way, I would imagine. But, you know, to my, but, you know, the earth has always been, it hasn't been just, you know, there's been different species, many different species on it, as we kind of know. We don't know all those timelines and that sort of thing, but I'm closing off now because I don't know what I'm talking about. and I went on too long anyway. And it does get too complicated, and I lose myself and the audience, I'm sure. And I really, I will try to make videos when I have more energy, and when, when I can put comfortably put some ideas, or the fairy tales even, and I'll talk about some other movies. I've still got that whole big list, because I think the movies show the reality, and even the fairy tales and the ideas and things that I think are important even from movies, because I just will pick out the movies because I believe they show the whole reality. But you'll need to have every movie. You'll need to have just more than one movie. You can't just look at one movie. But you can get a lot out of each individual movie. And that will depend on how you look at them, though. So the only reason I look at them and say what I think about is because I see that as the main point. Or what I think they're saying now. Maybe not even what I thought they were saying a few years ago, because you can change your view. You can see... even movies and what you see around you, you can completely change your idea of what you see about things if you look at it in a different way, or you have a change of mind or a change of heart about things, shall we say. Sometimes I think I sound as though I know what I'm talking about, but then I think it sounds interesting, but does it make full comprehensible sense overall? And I think probably not. But, you'll have to fill in a lot of gaps for yourself. But, anyway, a few little points there that, I don't know, might be, like I say, numbers in this actual matrix. In other words, just on this earth, numbers can make a big difference, and we may not have the right numbers with so many things, and that's why we get the matrix wrong, and how things are really working in the world. We could get it totally wrong, and I could have it wrong too. I can't prove any statistics, and I didn't give statistics anyway. I just was, and I certainly didn't give the whole numbers. I only talked, because you could say, well, I'm talking about cats and dogs. I'm not talking about elephants and birds and all sorts of other things. I'm not talking about everything that's on this earth. So numbers, and it's all spirit, don't forget. There's a lot of spirit. Don't forget you can have spirits and non-spirits in many different species. I think anyway. I don't think that all, some people even think that you can have elements, because and that they would be people that, are more advanced than me, because they actually can almost see where the spirit is in this earth. In other words, they could perhaps see that there is spirit in even what we would consider to be not we know that everything that lives is a life force, but we don't think that everything that lives has a spirit in it. You know what I mean? Whereas some people might say that, everything does, but maybe it just depends on the degree. See, the degree, whereas humans, of course, were supposed to be able to rise to the highest level, you know. But it could well be that, the bird outside has more spirit than me at the moment. And I think that is quite likely, even though I'm sure it is also battling it a little bit with the bad weather that we've had and the astronomical rain and stuff like that. But, it could still have more spirit than me at the present time. If you could get some sort of device that could gauge frequency, vibration, and energy, which are the three things that I talk about, even though I don't know what I'm really talking about because I don't really understand those things. And I'm sure that the matrix can gauge these things. I'm sure that the matrix, which is the world, and those that control the matrix, shall we say, I'm sure they can see exactly how the frequencies operate. And they can probably look at the human and the world and everything that is on it and see how the frequencies and the matter is interacting with one another, playing off one another, hitting one another. Even destroying, we can't see that, but there would, it's a bit like using an X-ray or something. You can only see certain thing, but if humans were at a higher frequency, I believe they would be able to see much more of this. They would know how things were working a bit more. Whereas now we have to go to different sources and try to figure it out. It's doing it the real hard way. And who knows if we ever get to the bottom of anything, I don't know. But, certainly some people certainly are finding out more things that they would have cared to, and some would be very pleased to at least know what they didn't know before. It may, things can have a negative thing. Ignorance is bliss, they say, but, it shouldn't be really like that at all. But if you see everything a bit negative, it can almost get like that, but it shouldn't be like that. It should be that what you know and what is real and what benefits you is going to serve you good. But but that depends on what the matrix is about and what's going on around you and what it is. So it may or may not, but I would still say, as I said before, I think that in the long run, it kind of makes sense to me that in the long run it would serve most people to understand, how things work too. I would think so. Maybe not always in the present, because if you upset the cart and your reality, you find out that maybe what you thought was not. It's a bit like if you find out that someone or something is not as good or what you thought, you're very disappointed. And, you might, have wished to have continued with the fairy tale or the fantasy. And, but it's all a matter of opinion, in some ways. There would be a bottom line that would be some sort of reality, I would think. But, it's still to some extent it's also what we're creating. So that's how it gets confusing for us, because we're not used to that, and we don't understand it. So it's yeah. And we don't have control over it either, because if you're in a different environment where others also are controlling things, like I say, where if you're dealing with narcissists and different other characters, it's not each individual, regardless of what you want or what I want or what anyone wants, none of us are operating to where we can have it all our own way, shall we say. We can't control the reality to the extent to which we maybe even should be able to, and certainly not what we would want to be able to or could. We're not going to be able to do that, because we're not in harmony with the matrix or our surroundings anyway. We're at odds with it, and it is at odds with us a lot of the time too. So it's like this continual push and pull, really, and we don't even understand how it works. And some of us, even if we had the power to, or the ability to, manoeuvre things in our favour or someone else's favour, we just don't know how to do it even, because we don't believe in that spiritual ability or that mental ability even. We think we have to do it the way of the matrix. We do things the way the matrix tends to direct us, which may or may not be the easiest or the best way. Who knows, Anyway, hope everyone's not doing too bad out there, and I'm sure that regardless, as I've said, the individual is really the main thing. And of course the narcissists would agree with this, because they tend to think that the world revolves around them. And what they don't know is that it really does revolve around them. Everything revolves around the human being. Everything, literally, physically, mentally, spiritually, all revolves around the human being. And it's kind of strange that some human beings think that they are the centre of the universe, consciously, but subconsciously they don't think that, because they have to they don't understand that they really are, and then they would let go of the need to try to control and manipulate the environment just that's local to them, or humans that are local to them, because they would actually realise that they are really the centre of the universe, that the world does revolve directly. The universe revolves around them. Well, when I say the universe, I really mean the matrix revolves around them. The matrix is really the earth, and it's a certain region. Who knows what that region is? Who knows how far that region goes? I used to think that it went further than what it does. I would now say maybe it's more confined than what I thought. That's actually reassuring. Well, it's disturbing in one way, because it's different to what you would think, but at the same time it's reassuring for some, because it really means that yes, the world does revolve around the individual. So because most of us have felt very lost most of our lives. Well, we still do now, because the matrix is so confusing. But if I would think that to think maybe that it's more smaller and that everything is more confined would have been much more reassuring to me when I was younger. I would have liked that idea. It may not have changed my life, but it probably could have. But it would have been a lot more reassuring, because if you think that you're a little pinprick in the vastness of everything, it tends to make for fear and isolation and stuff, which is what we have really felt, and it's uncomfortable. And whereas if something is smaller, it's more homely and it's more it's and the potential for more control, but not in this matrix, because even though it might be smaller, it is still a different domain. It's not my world, so, but it's still, anyway, I went on too long, but I might be able to pinpoint things and get better. I said that last time, but instead I'm probably getting worse, because it's a bit harder, as the world gets more chaotic, because the matrix is all chaos. The world is all chaos, and it's a reverse world. So everything that you think is the other way round, and most of what you see and think about things are actually in reverse. At least that's what I think, anyway. And many others do think this too. And if you look at it, it depends on how you look at things, of course, and it depends on what you think is the reality too. And it depends on what you think is acceptable or should be. So even just what I just said now is still, I assume that most people would probably have a common ground agreement, because of the reality that people tend to express the same beliefs and the same ideas of what they think is good and desirable, etc. But the reality is that even though that may be the case, their actual reality is not really that at all. Now, whether they delude themselves, or whether they are phony, shall we say, or they like to pretend that everything's different to what it is, whether they've deluded themselves or whether they enjoy deluding me or someone else, or, because, you could say the same about me. You might say, well, look, she's deluded and she enjoys saying deluded things, and maybe she enjoys deluding someone else, because it really is just going to be how you think about it. It's not, and especially now. I would have thought personally, I can't believe how convoluted the world is, and how convoluted people now think about things, and how they talk about things, and how, because it's changing all the time. And the longer you live, the more you see the changes. And if you haven't moved with those changes, or they are not acceptable to you, well, then you you will not understand where people are coming from now, which is probably my problem. I don't understand fully where everyone is coming from, because I tend, even with, despite me not being the most realistic person in the world, and I'm not, never have been, I still think that I've had a little bit of common sense, like I said, a little bit of, things are a certain way. If you see something a certain way, if it's a duck, if it looks like a duck, if it talks like a duck, if it walks like a duck, it's a duck. Whereas nowadays people would probably say, no, it's not. It can be whatever you want. It can be an elephant. It could be something else. Or maybe you're not looking at it the right way, and maybe I'm not. I don't know. But that I find strange, because, I probably would have come from, a time when a lot more things were more stable. There wasn't as much variables. Now, some people might say, well, that's because people were simple